And welcome back to another episode of Color Break, a comic book podcast. I'm your host, Cody, or Cody Collects, and I'm here with my host, as always, Christian, Comic Book Stash. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing good, man. How's it going with you?
It's going all right, Got back, Christmas is over. It's always fun seeing the family, right? Glad I'm back now. But Christian, listen, buddy, we got a special guest. I don't know if you can see him on your screen right now. This might be a surprise for you. But we're here with Dave Chisholm.
Hey.
I wrote a little bio, Dave, before I throw it to you.
Uh-oh.
Straight from your site, so it's nothing too crazy. Dave is a trumpet player, cartoonist, composer, educator, whose recent work in comics includes Chasing the Bird, Canopus, and of course, Enter the Blue, which is a Christian and I both picked up our copies and finished it in one sitting. I don't want to speak for Christian, but I thought it was amazing. It was amazing, Dave. You killed it.
That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Yeah. So Christian, real quick, dude. Real quick, and I'm talking 2 sentences. What'd you think of Enter the Blue?
I read it at my girlfriend's grandma's house, and I cried in her living room. That's all I gotta say. It's really good.
Fantastic.
It made you cry, right?
Yeah. It's I like jazz, and it was about jazz, and the character were really well developed, and that I don't know, it got to me. There wasn't like a specific like panel. It was just the colors, and I was like, okay, tears.
Nice.
I love it.
Yeah. So Dave, I gotta tell you, so I started playing saxophone, alto sax in 4th grade. And then I did, band, jazz band, high school, middle school. And then in college, I actually did, I didn't want to put down the sax. I got to figure out something to do. So I joined pep band, just playing, like pop songs for the hockey games and basketball games, stuff like that. But yeah, had a ton of fun. So it really spoke to me, kind of the mentor and mentee relationship you kind of showed in Enter the Blue.
Nice.
I thought that was, you hit the nail on the head there, because, my band teachers have always been my favorite of my teachers, and the ones that I end up being closer to than all the other ones. So yeah.
That's cool, man. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. So before we really get into the show, couple of housekeeping things. I just want to remind everybody our next segment of First Run is going to be on Rom V's Swamp Thing. So make sure to read that with us. It's free on Hoopla, free with a library card. And yeah, we'll be looking for write-ins soon. So look forward to that. And then the very next episode, so that Swamp Thing by Rom V will be at the end of January. Very next episode is going to be our Comic Book of the Year award showcase. So look forward to that. That's going to be with That Nerdy Papa Bear. Should be a fun episode. Dave, if you don't mind me asking, what has been like a comic book series that has really stood out to you this year? It doesn't necessarily have to be your favorite, but
I really love The Nice House on the Lake. That's probably been my favorite series of the last couple years. And I think, yeah, that's the one that sticks out the most to me. I'm trying to think of what else I have to read as soon as I bring it in. Yeah, mainly that one, I guess.
Yeah, you know what?
Have you guys read that one?
The last issue came out today, and I'm here, so I'm not gonna go buy it. But I'm actually kind of glad I'm not buying it, because I'm terrified of reading the last one.
Yeah. Why are you terrified? Because it's kind of a horror comic, or
no? It's just my favorite series at the moment, and I don't want it to end, but I also I don't want it to keep going, because I don't want it to be ruined by length.
Yep.
And I'm just I'm just stuck in a place where I'm I don't want it to end right now, so I don't want to even pick it up. But I'll have to do it.
I get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I that's definitely been one of my favorites of the year too. Tinian's just killing it. Everything he's doing is gold. So yeah, I can't wait to finish that up. I'm sure it'll end up super high on our award show that we're doing. I'm sure
I
we'll be
believe
talking
it.
a lot about it there. But yeah, all right. So Dave, first question we usually ask a guest is how did they get into kind of the world of comics, like
Mm.
whether be introduced to it at a young age or whatever. So I'm just curious about your story in the comics.
Yeah, probably like most people, I'm a real lifer. Um, my mom claims my first word was Spider-Man to this day, and so I loved like, and I was always surrounded in my house. We were always surrounded by comics and music all the time, um, and it didn't take very long for me to start drawing, and then everything I drew was like comic characters and comics, and I made my own comic when I was like 5 years old that was really terrible, and then um, yeah, I just kind of stuck with it, and I drew a lot of comics in like high school, and then when I started college, I majored in music instead of art, and then I kind of got back into making comics uh, a few years after I graduated with my bachelor's degree, and I had been touring with a rock band it fell apart, and I was really kind of like pissed off about that. So I kind of like put all of my creative efforts into something that wasn't music, and I made a series called Let's Go to Utah, which was like a 9-issue series that I self published, and actually ended up becoming like a weird cult hit in around 2007, 2008, 2009, and that led to some like published opportunities. I had a short story published by Dark Horse Comics, and then around that time I started work. I started my master's degree in music, and then I moved here to Rochester, New York, and got my doctorate. And when I was working on my coursework for my doctorate, I had this idea for another comic that would be one with like a soundtrack of music. And so as soon as I finished work on my degree, I started I started work on that because I had this really like intense work ethic at the time, like a really rigorous routine, which is kind of important for making comics. And and so that book eventually came out in 2017, 2018. I can't remember 2018. It's called Instrumental, and it was published by Z2 Comics, and who are the people who put out Chasing the Bird and my new book Enter the Blue, and yeah, and I kind of realized, maybe sadly, tragically, later than I should have realized, that it seemed like my comic book work connected with general people generally more than my music did, and at the same time, like it was a lot more special of a thing. I think like there were fewer people in my circles who were comic book people, and everyone had a band, and so it was kind of this unique thing to be like the guy that makes comics as opposed to the guy who plays jazz music or does like singer songwriter stuff or whatever. um, and so at that point I kind of was like, I should probably put a little more effort into like comic work. um, and so then I kind of like went all in and made Canopus, and then Chasing the Bird kind of fell into my lap, and then it's just been kind of like an accelerating, um, a big accelerating machine since then. Yeah, that's basically the whole story.
Nice, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah.
I think it's mentioning instrumental. I when I read about it, because I want to buy it and I will buy it because it just spoke to me. The idea of using music, like having a soundtrack for a book, is something that I had never thought about.
Oh yeah.
But it makes sense. I mean, reading Enter the Blue, at least I felt there's a rhythm to it.
Mm.
And I think most books have a rhythm, and you sort of forget that it's not just about like, oh, I have to like read some words. Like you fall into a rhythm of reading. Sometimes I will buy a book. Like I have a Flash omnibus back there that I started read. I could not. I was like, I can't read this right now. I
Yeah,
just can't get into it. But there's some books that you will pick up and just keep reading, and your brain will not let you do anything else. And
yeah,
the
yeah.
having an instrumental backing for reading a book just makes sense in my head.
It's a funny thing. It's kind of like I don't want to overstate it, but I think it is a little bit of like a controversial statement in the comics world, because I know that there are like comics people who I've encountered who, like, when they heard like about a graphic novel with a soundtrack of music, they're like, comics aren't supposed to have sound. Like, they're supposed to be silent, like because then, like, people, as soon as you add a soundtrack, you're kind of telling people how fast they're allowed to read the book, right? And one of the joys of comics and reading in general is that you can just sit and stare at the same page for like the rest of your life if you want to, right? Um, and so I obviously agree with you, and I think that there's a lot of like fun in the interplay between these two kind of like media types. But at the same time, I think there is a certain amount of irreconcilability with them, where like when you push play on a track of music, that is like fixed. That's like a set amount of time. There's nothing you can do about it. It's going to play through no matter what you're doing. It's you can't control the time. Whereas with a comic, you're in total control of it. And I like the challenge of that. I kind of like embrace the challenge of it. But definitely, I've encountered other creators who are like, "That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard." Who think it's like a really dumb idea. Uh, Someday I'll do it again. Someday I'll make another book with a soundtrack like Instrumental has. But uh, in hind, I still believe in that book. I think it's a really fun book. I think it's a strong read. But in hindsight, there are definitely some things about it that I'm like, if I could do it again, I would like do this and that differently. So anyway, yeah,
Well, I'm letting let you know if you put it out, I'll be there because it makes sense to me.
hell yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I found it I found it really interesting too. Because there were some books in the past that have tried to do something similar. I'm trying to think one that sticks out. I don't know if it's I think it came out of maybe Aftershock. I can't remember, but it's a book by Rom V. It keeps on getting delayed. It's in like it's really stuck in development hell. But in it, if they show like a record on the screen, like you're supposed to, or like in the pages of the comic, you're supposed to put that record on. Um, I think maybe another
Was that
series
Radio
of Image.
Apocalypse? Was that
Yeah,
Radio?
Radio Apocalypse. Yep.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I think I have the first issue of that. I don't know if I've read it yet. I'm not great at keeping up on all the books that I that I buy. I probably should do
Listen,
something about that. But
we're all comic book buyers and sometimes comic book readers.
yeah,
right. Yeah, we talk about all the time how behind we are. Like one of my goals this week was to catch up on my single issues in time for the award show or whatever, and then I can stay on top of it in theory every Wednesday. Just read, set aside an hour or two and just read everything that comes out. But we'll see how that goes.
yeah. It's a good problem to have. It's a good problem.
And I wanted to ask. I know you mentioned your first words being Spider Man. I know it's a joke, but you've made indie comic books, and I wanted to know if by any chance would you ever like go into that world where you're writing an established character like Spider Man, or does it sound too big, or
uh,
like you don't want to touch it? It's so perfect. It's
no,
supposed to stay there.
I would. Well, I think there's really two answers to that question, right? So, like, on one hand, like as an artiste, like as like a I guess there's like three answers. I don't know, maybe nine answers, but like on one hand, like as like an artiste, like, and I use that funny pronunciation to mean like as a creator in like a perfect world where I'm not like stressed about paying my bills and stuff like that. I would probably like prefer to just do my own stuff. But also like I think it could be fun to get a chance to work on some of these characters. Like I love Superman, I love Spider-Man, I love Batman. I'm just like everybody else. I just love like the kind of like classic these like long-standing characters. It's like a jazz standard, you know. It's like, do we need another version of Autumn Leaves or some jazz standard, you know, of So What by Miles Davis or whatever? And sure, of course we do. Like, there's tons of different ways we can put our own spin on it, and I would love to get the chance to put my own spin on it. I would say that like I would probably prefer to work on like a mini series as opposed to like an ongoing title, um, just because I probably would want to make it like probably want to do some weird stuff with it. You know, I would probably want to like just to not have to worry about continuity and everything like that. If I was to get an opportunity to work with one of these kind of like monumental characters, and then the second answer is like, well, the second answer is like if some writer wanted to hire me, I would do that in a heartbeat. That would be a blast. If I didn't have to write the story, that would be really fun to do. If I was writing it, then I would want to do like something really like smaller and trippy and weird or something like that. And then the third answer is, you know, I at this point like the main thing that pays my bills is making comics. So totally would love to do that stuff because anything I can do to like increase the profile of me in the comics world is I think like would be like great for me to do. So like obviously I want to write my own stories and tell personal stories and stuff like that, but like, you know, there's no substitute for like getting work with Marvel or DC to increase the profile of a creator, and I would love that. I would love to take a swing at that stuff.
It's something like we've talked about in this podcast. Like we do this for fun. You know, this is
Yeah,
just like I get to talk to one of my best buds for like an hour about comic books. But if someone were to pay me, I wouldn't complain. You know, so you got to make money in the end. So I understand that like you want to keep things a certain way because you know making your own stuff you have your own
right,
rhythm and you know you have your own deadlines, you have your own stories, and maybe
right.
working for a bigger company would you know dampen those things. But at the same time, you got to make money sometimes. So I understand.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of gross that it has to be that way, um, but yeah,
So Dave, when you know, when you mentioned it, I kind of got the vibe that maybe writing comics isn't your um, okay. So out of all the hats that you have to wear when you create something like Enter the Blue, what is your least favorite hat to wear? I guess.
I love all of them. I love all of them. But like for my brain, like uh, definitely like I hmm. I want to make sure to answer this like with a real like honest answer. Like um the when when I think about drawing comics and laying them out, doing the layouts and doing the pencils and doing the inks and all that stuff and taking reference photos as needed and whatever else, um, it's like very fun and very easy and time consuming, but it's like super. It's like very fun and easy. Uh, Not to say that like it's always easy and there aren't challenges along the way, but like there's nothing about it that like stresses me out, and I really trust myself that if I don't have a solution that I will like that I can improvise. I can use some of my training in jazz music, and I'm like I trust myself to if I take that leap and start drawing something that it's gonna look cool in the end, even if I'm not totally sure exactly what is gonna happen, right? And I don't have that level of self trust yet with my writing. So when I'm working on a story, I spend a lot of time in the prep stages, like going over it again and again and again and again to make sure that like there aren't any plot holes, that the characters all have their own unique motivations, that the story has structure, but the structure isn't too obvious. That there's a real theme to the story, that there's a real underlying kind of like bit of survival information that exists as like a little like engine at the heart of the story. And I don't think that I don't think I'm quite experienced enough in that regard to like really like let go and just trust myself to like get to the end without having every step of the way planned out. Whereas when I'm drawing, I've drawn so much in my life that like I I trust myself a little bit more. So like to think about what part I enjoy, I love all of it. Honestly, like I love writing it. It's really expressive, it's really personal, it's very cathartic. And at the same time, it's like the most stressful part of it for me. Um, but I love everything about it. I love doing every single step. There's no step that I don't get total joy from. I even like lettering my own books, and I've kind of grown to really, really love coloring. I've just really kind of embraced color as a great tool for delivering aspects of story, and you can really see that in the Enter the Blue.
Oh, 100%. I mean, for me, I studied film in college, and I went into making movies and every aspect of it, writing, directing, editing. And someone asked me recently, "Hey, what's the part you like the least?"
Mm-hmm.
And to me, even when I'm on a film set and something goes wrong, there's something so like exhilarating about it that I love. I mean, those moments of panic where I had to fix something on the spot, I
Yeah,
love it. So when people were like, "What's the thing you hate the most?" I hate coming up with the title. I
yeah,
can write you a 2 hour movie, but I had to come up with a title, and I'm just sitting there for weeks. And
yeah. I get
I
that.
will
Yeah.
say, Enter the Blue, perfect title.
Oh,
I'm putting it
thanks,
out there.
thanks,
I was like, this works
thanks so much.
because you don't really know what it is about, and then you read it, and you're like, oh, there it is.
Yeah,
Simple,
yeah. And
but
there's that little intro that kind of like puts it on the table what the magic is, without really getting too explainy about it, I suppose, at least in that scene. Anyway.
yeah. And before because we want to talk about this book specifically, I did want to say like a mini monologue about how I personally got to read this book. I grew up in Ecuador, and my dad listens to a lot of rock music, so I was mainly raised in to rock, a rock and roll household. And then one day I watched the movie, and a song by Otis Redding was playing. It was
Mm,
For Your Precious Love, and then I jumped into that and blues, and then jazz. And jazz was something I just liked. I liked driving to jazz. My
yeah.
best friend gave me an album called Late Night Sax, and I stopped listening to it at night because I would get too relaxed. Um, but now I just listen to jazz, and all the time. It's like a background to when I'm driving. It's always there. And when we started this podcast, jazz was a big thing for us because Cody was in band. I listen to jazz, and jazz it doesn't interrupt my driving or my life. It accompanies me. It makes everything like more heightened around me. Like if I look at the city, I'm reminded of like those montages of people like going to New York in the movies and they're looking out the window.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're making this podcast about comic books, loosely inspired by jazz. And I hear about your book, and I was like, I need to buy this immediately. And I remember like when we got it, it was just like we have to talk about this on the podcast, and we got the opportunity to have you now. And I do want to say like my mini review, it not because you're here. I've told this to everyone that cares to listen for more than 5 seconds. This really changed me. I cried, and
Man, that's
it made my top three immediately. Like it was just something that I could not put down. And
that's so
I
cool.
want to hear what Cody has to say about it, but I also want to know how we got into making this book. Your
Yeah,
inspiration behind it.
yeah. Uh, do you want me to talk about that now?
Oh,
Uh,
real quick, I can just go on I kind of echo some of the same sentiments that Christian has. I mean, just from being a band kid, I kind of talked about it earlier, but yeah, just I don't know, this book really hit me in the feels. And when you're going on, when you were saying earlier about your experience lettering and how you're feeling more comfortable with coloring, I definitely think it shines through. I mean, those moments where you are in the blue and it's so kind of ethereal and dreamlike, um, were some really great sequences that I really love. Those will definitely stick with me, for a while. And just the theme and message behind the book as well.
Mm,
I just thought it was super strong. So, yeah,
that's
congrats on the
cool.
release of the book. I know. Uh, I think I first was aware of this book. I think Albert Loves Comics, who we've had as a
Yeah.
guest on the show as well. He made a review for it, and I was like, "Man, this book is standout. We got to get it." I think that might be when I was messaging Christian, like, "Dude, we gotta get this book and review it for the show." So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Yeah, Albert's a cool guy for sure. He's like he makes the best little short videos for about like comic reviews. They're always so poetic and awesome.
for sure.
Um
Yeah, if we want to talk about a writer, I mean, Albert's got a way with words. So
for sure.
I'm sure a lot of people have, just like how we bought Enter the Blue. I'm sure a lot of people have bought things based on Albert's
For sure.
recommendations. But yeah,
So yeah, like the story behind this book is honestly like I had done a couple books for Z2 and they've basically pivoted almost entirely to doing officially licensed like graphic novels about musicians and about music and inspired by musicians and like big name musicians or big name musical entities. And they were approached by Blue Note Records about doing a graphic novel that somehow tied into Blue Note Records. And Blue Note is like a very old, very reputable, long-standing jazz record label that has put out like stuff by Coltrane and Miles Davis and Jimmy Smith and Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock and basically like every like major jazz artist from like 1948 on has like recorded for Blue Note in some capacity. And Z2, since I had done like instrumental and the Charlie Parker book, they were like, well, we have just the guy. And then I pitched a nonfiction story, and then they were like, oh, we actually want a fictional story. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. And then the story basically just came together. I had some inspiration from, I just went over the plot over and over and over again with my wife, who is also a musician, and she provided a lot of insight into that like teacher-student relationship. The relationship she has with her old cello teachers became the inspiration behind the relationship that Jesse has with Jimmy and Jimmy's wife Margot in the book. And yeah, it just turned into a very personal story. So even though it was commissioned in kind of like like a less than personal way, like I was it's sort of like, here's like a pre-existing property, what can you do with it? And so yeah, and we're all really happy with the way it ties Blue Note, very loosely ties Blue Note history and Blue Note's kind of famous graphic design into the mythos of this like fictional story.
yeah. I was just gonna compliment you on the cleverness, the way that you tied it all together into this kind of grander conspiracy theory. I thought it was,
Yeah.
yeah, I thought that was pretty smart.
It's
Um,
Thanks.
it's
yeah,
funny because in my discovery of jazz, I'm new to like just listening to like full on albums. Like I just got "Bitches Brew" by Miles Davis right there, so I'm like getting into specific artists. And a friend of mine recommended "Blue Train" by John Coltrane, and
Mm,
it was the week that I got the book. So
nice.
I'm
That
listening to
works.
Blue Train, and it's great. And then I start reading Into the Blue, and I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, it's right there. It's right there.
yeah.
That's
I mean,
cool.
tying back to kind of what we were talking about before, whether we maybe listen to music while we read comics or not. I think a lot of people that think you have two heads or something when you say listen to music. I mean, I kind of do the same thing Christian does, just chill, relax beats or jazz in this case. But yeah, I don't know. We typically when people say that they aren't listening to like Metallica or something with lyrics, and so I think that's
Right.
that's always interesting when people like, you listen to music while you read comics, but I don't know. That's how I do it. So
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. I mean, like, I'm the same way. And I get a lot of inspiration behind like the formalism of music and the formalism of comics and ways that these two things can um, reflect each other. Like every time Jesse goes into the blue, some aspect of the comic form changes to reflect the music. Like she's she's not she's drawn in black and white during the Duke Ellington sequence, or during the whole sequence with Charlie Hayden and Ornette Coleman. Those guys are all standing outside of the panel borders, and she's stuck inside of a box, right? Uh, and so on and so forth. So like, so those little bits of formalism really kind of give me a kick, and um, the ways that music can reflect the comic and everything like that. I think there's a little bit more of it in the Charlie Parker book, but I'm always kind of like trying to find new ways to like really have these two big media types like work together.
I think there was something about it that it speaks to it. Like, you know, people have a very, you know, tunnel vision kind of look into comic books, where it's just like, oh, you know, they'll either think like superheroes or just like it's
Right.
pictures with like 5 words on them. But it's something that it was reflected to me in the book reading it. You know, we have our main character who is a jazz musician, and she meets all these different jazz musicians, and they're all teaching her that her way is not the only way.
Right.
And you know, it expands the idea of jazz in her head, but also I think that's what comic books are. I mean, this is not, you know, we're not reading Spider-Man here, and that
Right.
doesn't mean, you know, comic books are not just one thing, just like jazz is not just one thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like
Exactly.
people read differently. Cordy reads while listening to music. It's different, and I like how much into the psyche of being a musician you got into this book,
Yeah.
but also you broke the boundaries of just having some panels on a page.
Yeah. Yeah. That's always like my one of my agendas. I think that at my like heart with comics, I'm definitely like a formalist, you know, like I'm always thinking about ways to kind of like find new ways to interpret a page, like a blank page. How do you like break it up into, how do you like show a chunk of time on a page in a way that's going to be not only like interesting, visually interesting, but also like reflecting the content of the plot on the page, right? It's always like that's the kind of stuff that really like gives me a huge kick when I'm making comics and when I'm reading comics as well.
yeah, and your so I caught your panel by panel interview.
Oh yeah,
So that was a really fun interview, by the way. Great read.
cool. Yeah, thank you.
Um, but so in it, you mentioned, I found it so interesting, and I wanted to ask you before I forgot. So in it, you mentioned that you have like some of these rules. So like for example, you have you always try to show like a character's feet just somewhere on the page, or you have you
Yeah,
know, like a large stack panel next to you, or a large panel next to two stack panels.
yeah.
So I don't know. I was just gonna ask you more about, you know, maybe if you had any other rules or kind of the thought process on, you know, why those rules are important to you.
Well, you know, I think that the rules are like different for each project, right? So the ground rules are different, and what giving yourself like parameters in the outset of a project gives you is something to lean up against and something to break through. Like if you like turn on Wizard of Oz, if the rules are that it's black and white and that you're in Kansas, and then about a third of the way through the movie, those rules are just like just absolutely obliterated, and the movie's in color, and they're in Oz, and that wouldn't mean anything without the rules being set up in Act One, right? And comics is such a form forward medium that like you can set up these kind of rules, like so for like a chapter of my next book, the rules might be that maybe the character feels like really confined during one stretch of his life, And so all the panels, I'm going to put like as many tall, thin panels as I can. So it looks like he's in like jail all the time. The page is going to look like bars of like a prison every time you without realizing what's going on. You have all of these tall vertical panels, and he's always confined. He's always like kind of squished into these little panels. And then as he gets more comfortable, the panels get like widen out and become more like wide panels when he's comfortable. Or like if there's a part of his life where like he's where the main character is free from kind of like in a different place and is free from constraints, then there's no panel borders anymore, right? Just get rid of the panel borders so that the form of the page reflects the content of the story without explaining it ever, without it having a real clever like, hey, look at this cool thing I did. Just have it be that way. And you can do that with color. You can. I get really kind of impatient with a lot of comic book color because they just color things the color they are, right? They're like they have a skin tone and they're like, okay, here it is, skin, white people's skin. Here it is, black people's skin, and then it's like color the way it feels, color the emotion of the scene instead of like color is such a powerful emotional tool, and people will be there with you. You won't lose people if all of a sudden all the people are purple on the page. People won't be like people will follow you there, and so and I'm sure it's the same with like film. It's the same thing with any media type. Is that if you set up a good sense of like normal, which is just basically setting a few rules for yourself in terms of how you're delivering the story, then when you like break those rules, it can mean something. It can really like create like an impactful moment for the reader, and it becomes especially powerful when the way it breaks the rules is somehow reflected in the plot or the actions of the characters or something like that.
Yeah, I think one of my I struggle a lot, and I've talked about it on the show before with reading old comic books. Like we read the Dark Phoenix saga, and one of those things is that they follow a format. The boxes are boxes, and you cannot break them. And some of my favorite books are they break that formula. Like it's not my favorite story wise, but Fight Club 2 has a lot of things that just jump at you. Things that are very realistic. You have like panels, and then I don't know where you have like juice spilling on them, like for example.
Sure, yeah.
And we talked about Nice House on the Lake. I remember when Walter first, becomes whatever monstrosity of smoke or ghost he is. It really it impacted me because it wasn't just a panel. They brought it to life, and I think that's what I like about this book. Once the jazz is reflected through you don't stick to just like, oh, these are boxes and we're gonna put drawings in them. No, you use every inch of that page to show the emotion you want to show, and that's the part that really stuck out to me.
That's cool. Yeah, I think there's so much potential for expressiveness in this medium, and like just kind of drawing what's there is can sometimes cut off the possibility of expression. All kinds of big ideas. That's cool. I'm glad that it connected with you guys.
So if we're talking about kind of the process and kind of thinking this way, if you were to go in and develop comics, like maybe, you know, not having the colors be the way they are, that's a super helpful tip. I was just curious, do you have any other, tips if someone was looking to get into comics, creating comics? I know, this guy, Christian over here, he's got some ideas. So
Yeah. Well, I suppose the biggest piece of advice, the thing that's helped me the most, is just realizing that is sort of like putting in the time to build the skills to do and all the parts of it if I want to, if I can, if I need to. I have a lot of friends who are writers who just go into so much debt hiring artists, and I just so if you have it all the time and the inkling, pick up a pencil and start drawing. as much as you can. That's like the first thing. And then if you're an artist and you like to draw, just take a stab at writing something. Don't put yourself in a situation where you have to rely on other people. If you can avoid it. I know that's not realistic for everybody, but that was helpful for me. And then the advice, it's kind of trite. It's kind of a little bit of a cliche, but like the best thing you can do is just to sit down and just draw a page, just make a page, copy the page by somebody who you love. Take your favorite page from your favorite comic and redraw it exactly, and then redraw another version of it, or pick a scene from a comic you like and reinterpret that scene from another character's point of view, or take your favorite song and make a comic based on your favorite song. Just like the key for this medium is just to be persistent. It's kind of like you have to look at the river that is in the middle of the Grand Canyon as your model. You just have to be like persistent and steady, and you could make something fantastic if you are just persistent. As soon as you give up, as soon as you kind of stop, then that's when you've lost, right? So it's just all about persistence, and the easiest way to be persistent is to be able to do everything and to not rely on other people. So it's kind of like, I guess that those would be my answers. In terms of the mundane stuff, if you're like ready to go and you're having a hard time getting started, like I really believe very strongly in the power of routine. And so like make sure that you make time for it, which can be hard. I know that it's a luxury to have time, and I'm someone who has had several like I've been really fortunate in my life to be able to like do this work that I do. And so like, but part of that is sort of like when I was in a situation in my life where I had the gift of a lot of time, even if it was like a stressful thing to like, well, I'm underemployed, I'm not making a lot of money, but I have a lot of time. Like that is a huge resource. So if you find yourself in that situation where you're like, oh, you lost your summer job, or you lost your job, or like you finished this or that, you finish your semester at school and now you're like kind of waiting to see instead of just having a good time, which is great, maybe take a shot at like giving yourself like 3 hours a day, 4 hours a day to work on a comic, just to see what happens. So yeah, I think that's probably the best answer I can give you for that.
It's perfect, honestly. Thank you. And I want to say thank you and for writing this book. And I want to thank you because I think it is important, and I hope more people, go out and buy it and read your other books. I know I will be doing that.
Hell yeah.
I have one last question because we don't want to keep you here forever, and I don't know if Cody has anything else to ask, but I think a lot of people misinterpret what jazz is, and they think it's just some old music that no one listens to. I know I love it, but seeing how much you know about it and how much you're driven by it, if you could recommend like one album or something to new listeners who might be reading this comic book.
Oh man. Well, it's tricky, right? Because like I think probably I could like really walk the party line and be like, here's a great Blue Note album, right? Because it's a Blue Note thing, and there's tons of great Blue Note albums that are coming out right now. And so I suppose like there's a trumpet player who's on Blue Note who's named Ambrose, and I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. I think it's like Akin Musire, Akinmusire, and his albums that he's put out on Blue Note are really killer albums. They're a little bit I would say they're a little bit like expert level. They are sometimes difficult to listen to, like challenging listens. They're it's not like it's not the most casual music out there, but it's really like rewarding stuff if you dig in. There's also a record, a composer named Darcy James Argue, Argue, like like an argument, and he has a record called Infernal Machines that came out maybe like 10 years ago, and that album just totally is just amazing. And it's something that I think is immediately relatable to, but like immediately relatable to like modern ears of like pop music and rock music without being pandering. It's like a fine line when sometimes when jazz musicians try to make like rock inspired music, it comes across as very like cheesy and pandering, and he manages to like have like stuff that's inspired by newer music in a way that's really honest and really cool. So I would recommend that record, probably like those two records. I suppose I'm not sure which Ambrose album, just like any of his newer ones, like When the Heart Emerges Glistening, I think is the name of one of them. But anyway, they're cool records for sure.
Yeah, that's always been like one of my favorite parts about jazz is that you kind of do have to work at it just a tiny bit to get your foot in the door and kind of understand a little bit about what's going on.
Yeah,
That's always been my favorite part about it. So I'll definitely check out some of the expert level stuff and see if I can hang. Uh, but yeah, I don't know, Christian, do you got any final words before I throw it to Dave for the?
No, I just want to say, just go buy this book. Honestly, go listen to jazz.
I agree.
I will say jazz is not something that's supposed to be scary. I listen to it just when I'm driving, and it heightens my drive. It really just accompanies me. Sometimes you want to sing your lungs out, but sometimes you just need a partner, and that's what jazz music does to me. So yeah, go listen to jazz. Don't listen to people who say like it's dead or like. I mean, look at the amount of movies about jazz that are coming out every year. It's still
true.
here. Jazz music is still coming out, and yeah, go support jazz creators in general.
Yeah,
Right
hey,
on.
well said, Christian. So Dave, I'll throw it to you. I mean, you got any final words? Any upcoming projects you want to shout out? Any of your social media? They'll be in the description as well. But give you the chance, platform.
Honestly, my next book, I'm about 2/3 of the way through making it, maybe a little bit over, like 3/4 of the way through the book, through making it, and I can't talk about it. So
No worries.
it's
Absolutely.
like,
We're not looking for any exclusives here.
but like, you can always find me. I'm like on Twitter, and I'm on TikTok, and I'm easy to find. So just if you just like Google me, my Twitter handle is my last name, then my first name, and my TikTok is Dave Chisholm Comics, and Instagram. I mean, it's people know how to search on these things, so I'm not even gonna stress about it.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, so thank you so much to Dave for joining us. Issue number 11 of Color Break Comic Book Podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Just a reminder, next episode will be our award show, so definitely write in with some of your favorite comic books, or maybe comic that you purchased, your favorite omnibus you picked up this year or something like that. And yeah, definitely be sure to read Swamp Thing by Ram V. That'll be our next first run. Free on Hoopla, library card. That's the last time I'll say it this episode. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you in issue number 12.